The scorching Arizona sun beat down mercilessly as Lillian Summers stood frozen in the center of Redemption Creek's dusty Main Street, her heart pounding against her ribs like a frightened rabbit. It was 1878, and at 22, she had never felt more alone or more determined to forge her own path in this unforgiving frontier town. "Go on, Miss Fancy Eastern Lady, let's hear that voice you've been bragging about," shouted a red-faced miner from the crowd that had gathered outside the saloon. Lillian clutched her worn leather satchel tighter, her knuckles turning white. She hadn't been bragging, merely mentioning to Mrs. Holloway at the general store that she'd once sung in her church choir back in Boston. Somehow, that innocent comment had transformed into a town-wide rumor that she fancied herself the next Jenny Lind. And now here she was, surrounded by a dozen weather-beaten faces demanding a performance. "I never claimed to be a professional singer," Lillian said, her voice barely carrying over the afternoon bustle. "I simply enjoy music." "Well, enjoy it for us then," called another voice, followed by raucous laughter. Lillian had arrived in Redemption Creek just 3 days prior, desperate for a fresh start after her father's death left her with nothing but debts and painful memories. The teaching position advertised in the newspaper had seemed like providence until she arrived to discover the school wouldn't open for another month. Now she was nearly penniless, staying in a cramped room above the laundry and becoming the town's newest source of amusement. "Come on, Songbird." A woman cackled. "You Eastern ladies are always putting on airs." Something inside Lillian snapped. Perhaps it was pride, exhaustion, or sheer desperation, but she squared her shoulders and lifted her chin. If they wanted a song, she would give them one. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and began to sing Amazing Grace, her mother's favorite hymn. The first notes wavered uncertainly in the hot, dry air. Lillian's throat tightened with nervousness, causing her pitch to waver. Her normally clear soprano cracked on the higher notes, her voice trembling with each breath. The laughter began almost immediately, first a snicker, then a chuckle, until the entire crowd was howling with delight at her expense. Heat flooded Lillian's cheeks, but she forced herself to continue, each note more painful than the last. "Enough." A deep voice cut through the mockery like a knife. The crowd parted as a tall man strode forward, dust swirling around his worn leather boots. His face was partially shadowed by his wide-brimmed hat, but Lillian could see the firm set of his jaw and the intensity in his blue eyes. "That's quite enough," he repeated, his voice quieter but no less commanding. The laughter died instantly. Lillian recognized him vaguely, the cattle rancher from north of town, though she'd never spoken to him. Adam Blackburn, that was his name. His reputation preceded him. Fair but formidable, generous to those in need but merciless to those who crossed him. "Keep singing," he said, his eyes meeting hers. "You're perfectly in tune. Don't let these jackals tell you otherwise." Lillian blinked in surprise. I don't think, please," he said, the word more gentle than she would have expected from a man of his stature. "The hymn. My mother used to sing it." The crowd had fallen silent, shocked by Adam Blackburn's intervention. Lillian swallowed hard, took another breath, and began again, her voice steadier this time without the weight of mockery pressing against her chest. The notes flowed clearer, her confidence growing with each measure. Though not flawless, her voice was sweet and sincere, carrying the familiar melody through the suddenly still afternoon air. When she finished, there was a moment of complete silence. Then Adam Blackburn removed his hat and nodded respectfully. "Thank you, miss, that was mighty fine." Without another word, he turned to the crowd. "Show's over. Don't any of you have work to do?" The spectators dispersed quickly, no one willing to challenge Adam Blackburn's authority. As they scattered, he turned back to Lillian. "You new to Redemption Creek?" "Yes," she said, finding her voice again. "I arrived on Monday's stage. I'm to be the school teacher when the new schoolhouse opens." Adam studied her for a moment. "That's more than 3 weeks away." "Yes, I discovered that upon my arrival." "And your accommodations?" Lillian hesitated, pride warred with practicality. I'm staying above Wung's laundry until I receive my first wages. Adam frowned. That won't do. Mrs. Patterson at the boarding house has proper rooms for ladies. Mrs. Patterson charges $2 a week. I have exactly $4.63 to last until my first payment from the town council. Something flickered in Adam's eyes, not pity, which would have mortified her, but understanding. He nodded once, decisively. My sister Martha runs our household at the Diamond B Ranch. We've been looking for someone to help with the accounts and correspondence and to teach my nephew his letters. The position comes with room and board plus a small wage. It would tide you over until the school opens. Lillian stared at him, suspicion warring with desperate hope. Why would you offer such a position to a complete stranger? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Anyone who sings Amazing Grace with that much feeling isn't a stranger to decency, Miss Summers, Lillian Summers. Miss Summers, he nodded. The offer stands until sundown. If you're interested, I'll be at Jameson's general store purchasing supplies. He settled his hat back on his head. The choice is yours. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Lillian standing in the street, her heart racing with possibilities she hadn't dared imagine when she woke that morning. The Diamond B Ranch materialized from the hazy distance like a mirage, its sprawling main house and outbuildings nestled against a backdrop of rugged mountains. Lillian clutched the edge of the wagon seat, torn between relief that the jarring 2-hour journey was ending and apprehension about what awaited her. Home sweet home, Adam said beside her, his deep voice carrying over the creak of wagon wheels. He hadn't spoken much during their journey, occasionally pointing out landmarks or warning her about a particularly rough patch of road. It's much larger than I expected, Lillian admitted, taking in the 2-story main house with its wide porch and the surrounding structures, a bunkhouse, barn, stables, and various smaller buildings whose purposes she could only guess. Been building it up for 15 years, Adam said, a note of pride in his voice. Started with nothing but 50 acres, 3 cows, and more determination than sense. And now we run over 2,000 head of cattle on 12,000 acres. He guided the horses toward the main house. Still not enough sense, according to my sister. As they approached, a woman emerged onto the porch, shading her eyes against the late afternoon sun. Tall and straight-backed like her brother, Martha Blackburn had the same striking blue eyes, though her features were softer, framed by dark hair streaked with silver despite her apparent age of only 40 or so. "You're late," she called as Adam brought the wagon to a stop. "I was beginning to think you'd forgotten the sugar again." Her gaze shifted to Lillian. "And who might this be?" Adam jumped down from the wagon and extended a hand to help Lillian descend. "Martha, this is Miss Lillian Summers, our new schoolteacher. She'll be staying with us until the schoolhouse opens. Miss Summers, my sister Martha." Martha's eyebrows rose, but she quickly composed her features. "Well, this is unexpected. Welcome to Diamond B, Miss Summers." "Thank you for your hospitality, Miss," Martha corrected. "Never found a man worth the trouble, and it's Martha to everyone on this ranch." She eyed her brother. "I assume there's a reason you've brought our schoolteacher home like a stray kitten." Adam briefly explained the situation while Lillian fought to maintain her composure. She was not a charity case or a stray, and she opened her mouth to say as much when a small figure darted from the house and crashed into Adam's legs. "Uncle Adam, did you bring me anything?" A boy of about 7 looked up with a gap-toothed grin, his face dusty but his eyes Blackburn blue bright with excitement. Adam ruffled the boy's sandy hair. "Just some peppermint sticks, and your new teacher." The boy's gaze snapped to Lillian, assessing her with surprising intensity for one so young. "You don't look like a teacher. Where are your spectacles, James?" Martha scolded. "Mind your manners." Lillian knelt to the boy's level. "I don't need spectacles to see that you're a very observant young man. I'm Miss Summers." "I'm James Blackburn. My pa died in the war and my ma died when I was born, so I live here with Uncle Adam and Aunt Martha." he announced with the matter-of-factness of children. "I'm very pleased to meet you, James. Are you really going to teach me?" Uncle Adam tried, but he's not very good at explaining things. Adam cleared his throat. "Why don't we let Miss Summers get settled before you interrogate her, nephew? Come along," Martha said, gesturing toward the house. "I'll show you to your room, and you can refresh yourself before supper." Lillian followed, acutely aware of Adam's gaze on her back as she climbed the porch steps. The interior of the house surprised her. It was well appointed but comfortable, with solid furniture, colorful woven rugs, and bookshelves lining one wall of the main sitting room. Martha led her upstairs to a modest but pleasant bedroom with whitewashed walls, a narrow bed with a patchwork quilt, a small dresser, and a washstand. A window overlooked the corral and the mountains beyond. "It's not fancy," Martha said, "but it's clean and private." "It's lovely," Lillian said sincerely. After her cramped quarters above the laundry, this room felt palatial. "I'm grateful for your hospitality." Martha gave her a shrewd look. "My brother doesn't make a habit of bringing home strays, Miss Summers." "He must have seen something in you worth salvaging." The word stung, but Lillian lifted her chin. "I assure you, Miss Blackburn, I'm quite capable of salvaging myself. I accepted your brother's offer because it was mutually beneficial, not because I needed rescuing." To her surprise, Martha's stern face relaxed into a smile. "Good, no place for wilting flowers on a cattle ranch." She moved toward the door. "Supper's at 6. You'll find water in the pitcher, and there's a hook behind the door for your things." Left alone, Lillian sank onto the bed, the events of the day catching up with her. From public humiliation to unexpected rescue to this strange new situation, all in the span of hours. She glanced at her small satchel, containing everything she'd managed to bring from her former life: 2 dresses, undergarments, a hairbrush, her mother's Bible, and a daguerreotype of her parents on their wedding day. Not much to show for 22 years of life, but enough to build from. She wasn't a stray or a charity case. She was Lillian Summers, and she would prove her worth to the Blackburns and to herself. After washing away the dust of travel and changing into her less worn dress, Lillian made her way downstairs, following the sounds and smells of meal preparation. She found Martha in the kitchen, efficiently moving between the large cast iron stove and a wooden table where various dishes waited. "May I help?" Lillian asked from the doorway. Martha looked up, surprise evident on her face. "Most ladies don't offer to help in the kitchen." "I'm afraid I left most ladies behind in Boston," Lillian said with a small smile, "along with any pretensions about being above useful work." Martha gestured to a bowl of peas. "You can shell those if you've a mind to." Lillian sat and set to work, her fingers quickly finding the rhythm. "Have you always lived in Arizona Territory?" "Born in Missouri," Martha replied, slicing bread. "Our parents brought us west when Adam was 12 and I was 17. They both died of fever 2 years later. We've been on our own since." "I'm sorry for your loss," Lillian said softly. Martha shrugged, but her eyes held old pain. "Life out here doesn't allow much time for grieving. When they died, we had a half-built cabin and winter coming. Survival came first, and your nephew, James, is my brother's sister-in-law's boy. His father, Adam's friend from the war, died at Gettysburg. His mother passed in childbirth. Adam brought him home when he was just days old. That was very honorable of him. My brother has many faults, but lack of honor isn't among them." Martha glanced toward the window, where Adam could be seen crossing the yard with James on his shoulders. "He's raised that boy as his own, never once complaining about the responsibility." Something warm unfurled in Lillian's chest as she watched the tall rancher with his nephew. She quickly tamped it down. She was here to work, not to develop inconvenient feelings for her temporary employer. Supper was a simple but hearty affair: roast beef, potatoes, fresh peas, and bread still warm from the oven. The dining room, like the rest of the house, reflected practical comfort rather than ostentation, with a solid oak table that could seat 10 and a sideboard displaying what Lillian guessed were family heirlooms. Two ranch hands joined them, an older man named Hank, who served as foreman, and a younger Mexican man introduced as Miguel, who managed the horses. Their presence surprised Lillian. In Boston, servants would never have dined with the family. "Miss Summers," Adam said as they ate, "I've spoken with Hank and Miguel about your position here. Beyond helping James with his studies, we could use assistance with correspondence and accounts. The ranch has grown beyond our ability to manage the paperwork efficiently." "I'd be happy to help," Lillian said. "My father was a solicitor and I often assisted with his correspondence and record keeping." "A lawyer's daughter," Martha remarked. "That explains the proper speech. What happened to your father, Miss Summers?" James asked, earning him a reproachful look from his aunt. "James, that's not polite dinner conversation." "It's all right," Lillian said, though the wound was still fresh. "My father passed away 3 months ago after a lengthy illness. He had financial difficulties toward the end, which left me in reduced circumstances." Adam's eyes met hers across the table, and she saw understanding there. He knew what it meant to lose everything and start again. "Is that why you came west?" Miguel asked, his English accented but clear. Lillian nodded. "The teaching position offered a new beginning. I've always enjoyed working with children, and the advertisement promised housing and a respectable wage." "Well, the Diamond B might not be what you expected," Adam said, "but I believe we can make this arrangement work for everyone." "Uncle Adam," James interjected, "can Miss Summers sing for us after supper? I heard you telling Aunt Martha she has a nice voice." Lillian felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I'm afraid your uncle was being kind. My singing is very ordinary." "Nonetheless," Adam said, his deep voice somehow gentle, "we'd be honored to hear it if you're willing. Music is a rare treat out here." Something in his steady gaze made refusal impossible. After the dishes were cleared, they gathered in the sitting room. James sat cross-legged on the floor, while Hank and Miguel occupied chairs near the fireplace, which remained unlit in the summer heat. Martha took a seat in a rocking chair, her hands busy with mending, while Adam leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed over his broad chest. Lillian stood by the window, suddenly self-conscious. "What would you like to hear? Do you know any cowboy songs?" James asked eagerly. "I'm afraid not," Lillian admitted. "I know hymns and some folk songs from back east. Sing what feels natural," Adam suggested. Lillian chose Barbara Allen, a ballad her mother had often sung. Her voice started softly, uncertain, but as she continued, it gained strength and clarity. The song's haunting melody filled the room, its tale of unrequited love and regret somehow fitting in this wild, beautiful place so far from everything she'd known. When she finished, there was a moment of silence before James broke into enthusiastic applause. "That was sad but pretty." "Do you know a happy one?" "Let the lady rest her voice, James," Martha chided, but her expression had softened. "Your voice is a gift, señorita," Miguel said with a respectful nod. "Thank you," Lillian replied, touched by their kindness. "Perhaps tomorrow I can teach James some simpler songs." "I'd like that," the boy said eagerly. Later, as the household prepared for bed, Lillian found Adam on the porch, smoking a cigarette and gazing at the star-filled sky. She hesitated, then stepped outside, the wooden boards creaking beneath her feet. "I wanted to thank you," she said, "for today and for this opportunity." Adam turned, his face half illuminated by the light spilling from the window. "No need for thanks. The arrangement benefits us both. Nevertheless, your intervention in town was unexpected." He crushed out his cigarette. "I've no patience for cruelty, especially when directed at someone who's done nothing to deserve it." "How did you know I wasn't deserving of their mockery?" Lillian asked, genuinely curious. "I might have been putting on airs, as they suggested." A faint smile touched his lips. "I'm a fair judge of character, Miss Summers. You don't strike me as someone who would claim talents you don't possess." "No," she agreed. "If anything, I tend to underestimate my abilities. A common affliction among those with actual merit." He studied her face in the moonlight. "May I ask what brought you to Arizona Territory?" Teaching positions exist closer to Boston. Lillian gripped the porch railing, considering her answer. After my father died, I discovered he had borrowed extensively against our home and possessions. When everything was sold to satisfy his creditors, there was nothing left. No family, no prospects. She took a breath. I needed distance from the memories, from the pity of former friends, from everything that reminded me of what I'd lost. Adam nodded, understanding in his eyes. Sometimes the only way forward is to leave everything behind. Yes, exactly. She looked up at him. What about you? Martha mentioned you came west as a boy, but what made you stay in this particular place? He gestured toward the shadowy mountains. The first time I saw this valley, something in me recognized it as home. Can't explain it better than that. Just knew this was where I belonged. The simplicity of his answer touched her. That's a rare gift, finding where you belong. Is it? He turned to face her fully. Maybe you'll find your place here too, Miss Summers. The way he said it not as a platitude but as a genuine possibility made her heart skip. Perhaps, though my position at the schoolhouse is still a month away, he finished. A lot can happen in a month. Their eyes held for a moment too long, and Lillian felt a flutter of something dangerous in her chest. I should retire. Tomorrow will be a busy day, indeed. He opened the door for her. Sleep well, Miss Summers. Good night, Mr. Blackburn. As she climbed the stairs to her room, Lillian tried to ignore the warmth that lingered in her chest. Adam Blackburn was her employer. Temporarily, nothing more. Any foolish romantic notions would only complicate an already precarious situation. Yet as she lay in bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch at night, she couldn't help remembering the way he had stood up for her in town, the quiet confidence in his voice when he told her to keep singing. For the first time since her father's death, Lillian felt a fragile hope taking root. Perhaps there was a place for her in this harsh, beautiful country after all. The next week passed in a blur as Lillian settled into the rhythms of ranch life. Each morning, she rose with the dawn to help Martha prepare breakfast before spending the morning tutoring James. The boy was bright and curious, absorbing lessons in writing, arithmetic, and history with an enthusiasm that made teaching him a joy. Afternoons found her in Adam's study, a small room off the main sitting area filled with ledgers, correspondence, and maps. The ranch's bookkeeping was in disarray, with bills of sale, purchase orders, and cattle records stuffed haphazardly into drawers or piled on shelves. I apologize for the state of things, Adam had said on her first day, looking almost sheepish as he surveyed the chaos. Neither Martha nor I have the patience for paperwork. It's fortunate, then, that I do, Lillian had replied, already mentally organizing the system she would implement. Now, a week later, she was making significant progress. The afternoon sun slanted through the study window as she carefully recorded the sale of 30 head of cattle in the newly organized ledger. The sound of boots on the wooden floor made her look up to find Adam standing in the doorway, his tall frame filling the space. Making sense of my mess, he asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. Slowly but surely, Lillian replied, setting down her pen. Your ranch is more profitable than you realized, Mr. Blackburn. He stepped into the room, glancing at the neat stacks of papers she'd sorted. Call me Adam, please. Mr. Blackburn makes me feel like someone's looking for my father. Lillian hesitated. Such familiarity would be inappropriate in Boston society, but frontier customs were different. Very well. Adam, then you must call me Lillian. Lillian, he repeated, and something about the way her name sounded in his deep voice made her pulse quicken. What have you discovered about my finances? She cleared her throat, focusing on the ledger. You've been undercharging the Peterson outfit for grazing rights on your northern section. According to market rates, you should be asking nearly twice the current amount. Adam leaned against the desk, close enough that she could smell the leather and sunshine on him. Old man, Peterson helped me get started when I had nothing. Some debts can't be measured in dollars. That's admirably loyal, Lillian said, struck by his integrity. Not loyalty so much as remembering where I came from. He picked up one of her neatly labeled folders. "You've brought order to chaos in just a week. I'm impressed." Organization was essential in my father's practice. A misplaced document could mean disaster for a client. "And yet your father left his own affairs in disarray." It wasn't accusatory, merely curious. Lillian's fingers tightened on her pen. "My father was brilliant with the law, but less diligent with his personal matters, especially after my mother died." The illness at the end only worsened his tendency to ignore unpleasant realities. "I'm sorry," Adam said quietly. "Loss has a way of unraveling even the strongest among us." Their eyes met, and Lillian saw genuine understanding in his gaze. Not pity she couldn't have borne that, but the empathy of someone who knew grief's weight. The moment stretched between them, something unspoken passing in the quiet study, until the thunder of small feet in the hallway broke the spell. "Uncle Adam, Miss Lillian." James burst into the room, face flushed with excitement. "Miguel says a mountain lion took one of the calves last night. Are you going hunting for it?" Adam straightened, his expression shifting to one of concern. "Where did Miguel see the tracks?" "By the North Creek. He says it was a big one." "Tell Miguel I'll meet him at the stables in 10 minutes. As James dashed off, Adam turned back to Lillian. "I apologize for the interruption. Mountain lions occasionally become problems when they develop a taste for cattle. Will you kill it?" Lillian asked, uncertain how she felt about the prospect, if necessary. Usually tracking it to its territory and firing a few shots is enough to convince it to hunt elsewhere. He hesitated. "I may not return until after supper." "I understand. Ranch business comes first." He nodded, but lingered a moment longer. "Perhaps tomorrow evening, if you're willing, you might sing again. James has been asking, and—" He cleared his throat. "Your voice brings something to this house that's been missing for a long time." Before Lillian could respond, he was gone, leaving her with a curious mixture of emotions that she wasn't ready to examine too closely. That evening, as she helped Martha prepare supper, Lillian's thoughts kept returning to Adam. The ranch foreman and 3 hands had accompanied him and Miguel on the mountain lion hunt, leaving the main house unusually quiet. "Worried about them?" Martha asked, noting Lillian's distraction as she kneaded bread dough. "Is it dangerous, hunting mountain lions?" Martha shrugged, continuing to chop vegetables. "Everything out here carries some risk. Adam knows what he's doing, been tracking predators since he was 14. "He seems very capable," Lillian agreed, trying to sound neutral. Martha gave her a shrewd look. "He is. But don't go getting romantic notions, girl. Adam Blackburn doesn't let many people close." Lillian felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I assure you I have no such notions. My position here is temporary and I'm grateful for the opportunity, nothing more." Martha hummed, unconvinced. "Just remember, my brother built this ranch from nothing because he learned early that depending on others leads to disappointment. The only time I've seen that resolve waver was with James's mother." "His sister-in-law," Lillian couldn't help her curiosity. Eleanor was married to Adam's war friend, but there was a time before she met David when Adam fancied himself in love with her. Martha's knife moved rhythmically against the cutting board. When she chose David instead, something in Adam closed up. Then losing them both and being left with James, it reinforced his belief that attachments bring pain. "That's a lonely way to live," Lillian said softly. "It is," Martha agreed, "but loneliness can become a habit, same as anything else." She scraped the vegetables into a pot. "Don't mistake me, Adam's a good man, the best I know. Just not one who's looking for complications." "I understand," Lillian said, and she did. Her own heart was still healing from the losses she'd endured. The last thing she needed was to develop feelings for a man who kept his heart as carefully guarded as his ranch. But that night, as she lay in bed listening for the return of the hunting party, Lillian couldn't help wondering what it would be like to break through those carefully constructed walls, to discover the man beneath the stoic rancher's exterior. It was a dangerous line of thinking, and she firmly redirected her thoughts to the next day's lessons for James. Shortly before midnight, the sound of horses and men's voices drifted up to her window. They had returned safely then. Relief washed over her, followed immediately by self-recrimination. This attachment was exactly what she had resolved to avoid. Rolling over, Lillian closed her eyes, determined to maintain professional distance from Adam Blackburn. The Diamond B Ranch was a temporary haven, nothing more, and in a few weeks, she would take up her position at the schoolhouse as planned. Her dreams that night, however, refused to cooperate with her rational intentions. The next morning dawned clear and crisp, with a hint of autumn in the air despite the lingering summer heat. Lillian found James already at the kitchen table when she came down, excitedly recounting the mountain lion hunt to Martha. Uncle Adam tracked it all the way to the caves. Miguel said he's never seen anyone read sign like that before. They didn't have to shoot it, just fired into the air near its den, and Uncle Adam said that should keep it away from our cattle for a while. "Where is your uncle now?" Lillian asked, accepting a cup of coffee from Martha. "Checking the south pasture with Hank," Martha answered. "The men spotted signs of rust on some of the herd yesterday." James looked up from his porridge. "Miss Lillian, can we have our lesson outside today? It's too nice to be indoors." "I suppose we could move our geography lesson outdoors," Lillian agreed. "We could even make a map of the ranch." The boy's face lit up. "Really? With the creek and mountains and everything? Why not? Maps begin with observation. Your uncle must have maps of the property we could reference." "In his study," Martha confirmed. "Though I dare say between you and James, you know the main areas of the ranch well enough by now." After breakfast, Lillian gathered paper, pencils, and a board to serve as a drawing surface, and she and James settled under a large cottonwood tree near the house. The shade was pleasant, and from their vantage point they could see much of the ranch's central buildings and the beginning of the grazing lands beyond. "First," Lillian explained, "we need to establish our cardinal directions north, south, east, and west." "That's easy," James said confidently. "The sun rises over there," he pointed, "so that's east, and it sets behind those mountains, so that's west." "Very good. Now, if east is here and west is there, where are north and south?" James thought for a moment, then correctly indicated the remaining directions. Lillian was impressed with his quick understanding. "Now, let's start by placing the main house on our map. We'll use this as our center point." They worked together, James contributing his intimate knowledge of the ranch while Lillian guided him in translating that knowledge to paper. They had created a rough outline of the main buildings when a shadow fell across their work. "Cartography lessons, I see," Adam said, looking down at their map with interest. "Uncle Adam?" James scrambled to his feet. "Miss Lillian says maps start with observation, so we're making one of the ranch. Is that so?" Adam crouched to examine their work. "You've got the creek bending in the wrong spot, nephew. It curves more to the north before reaching the old oak." James frowned at the map. "You're right." "Can I fix it, Miss Lillian?" "Of course. Accuracy is essential in map making." She handed him an eraser, then glanced at Adam. "Martha mentioned you were checking for disease in the herd, just a precaution. A few calves showing signs that could be rust, could be nothing." He stood, dusting off his hands. "Your outdoor classroom seems successful. James is an excellent student. He absorbs knowledge like a sponge." Adam's expression softened as he watched his nephew carefully redrawing the creek. "He's a good boy, deserves more than lessons under a tree, though." "Education happens everywhere, not just in schoolrooms," Lillian said. "Some of my most valuable lessons came from my father's dinner table discussions or walks through Boston Common. Still, I want him to have advantages I didn't." There was something vulnerable in his admission that touched Lillian. "From what I can see, you're giving him exactly what he needs: stability, love, and encouragement to learn. Those are advantages many children with formal schooling never receive." Adam looked at her with surprise, as if her perspective hadn't occurred to him. Before he could respond, James tugged at his sleeve. "Is this right now, Uncle Adam?" The boy held up the corrected map. Adam examined it carefully. "Much better." You've got a good eye for detail, just like your teacher. James beamed at the praise. Miss Lillian says we'll add color tomorrow and maybe draw little pictures of cattle in the grazing areas. Sounds like quite a project. Adam ruffled the boy's hair. I need to head back out, but I'll see you both at supper. His eyes met Lillian's. Perhaps we'll have that music afterward, if you wish, she agreed, trying to ignore the flutter in her stomach at the warmth in his gaze. As he walked away, James looked up at Lillian. Uncle Adam likes your singing. He told Aunt Martha it reminds him of better times. Did he? Lillian murmured, watching Adam's retreating figure. Well, we should finish our map before the light changes. The shadows help us understand the landscape's contours. But as they returned to their cartography lesson, Lillian found her thoughts straying to the enigmatic rancher and the walls he'd built around his heart. What better times did her voice remind him of? And why did she increasingly want to be the one to bring those times back to him? That evening, after a hearty supper of venison stew and cornbread, the household gathered in the sitting room as promised. Hank had brought out his harmonica, and Miguel arrived with a battered guitar that he played with surprising skill. The atmosphere was festive, a celebration of the successful mountain lion tracking and the absence of serious disease in the herd. Miss Lillian is going to sing for us again, James announced, settling cross-legged on the floor near Miguel. Lillian smoothed her skirt, suddenly self-conscious with all eyes upon her. I thought perhaps we might try something different tonight. Miguel, do you know the water is wide? The young ranch hand nodded. She, señorita, my mother sang it, though she called it by another name. He strummed a few chords, finding the key, and then began a gentle accompaniment. Lillian closed her eyes and began to sing, her clear voice filling the room with the bittersweet ballad of love and loss. The water is wide, I cannot cross o'er, and neither have I wings to fly. Give me a boat that will carry two, and both shall row, my love and I. As she sang, Lillian opened her eyes and found Adam watching her from his place by the fireplace, his expression unreadable but intense. She held his gaze through the verse, something unspoken passing between them. Love is a growing or full-grown thing, and like the water flows from one heart to another heart, I know not how it goes. When the song ended, there was a moment of profound silence before James broke it with enthusiastic applause. That was even prettier with the guitar. Do you know any dancing songs? Miguel laughed. I know many dancing songs, Niño. Would you like to learn a simple one from my country? As Miguel began teaching James a lively Mexican folk song, Martha beckoned to Lillian. Come help me bring the coffee and apple tart from the kitchen. In the kitchen, as they arranged cups on a tray, Martha spoke quietly. You sing beautifully, girl, too beautifully for your own good, perhaps. Lillian looked up, startled. I don't understand, Martha sighed. I've seen how my brother looks at you when you sing. I've not seen that look since Aliner. I'm sure you're mistaken, Lillian stammered, heart racing. Mr. Blackburn Adam has been nothing but professional, because he's fighting it, Martha said bluntly, and you'd be wise to do the same. Martha, I assure you, you're leaving in 3 weeks, Martha interrupted. When the schoolhouse opens. Best remember that before either of you gets ideas that will only lead to heartache. Before Lillian could respond, Martha picked up the tray and returned to the sitting room, leaving Lillian to follow with the apple tart, her mind in turmoil. Was Martha right? Was Adam developing feelings for her? More disturbingly, was she developing feelings for him? The next 2 weeks seemed to fly by as Lillian fell into a comfortable routine at the Diamond Bee. Her mornings with James were productive, her afternoons organizing the ranch's accounts satisfying, and her evenings. Her evenings were increasingly complicated. After that second night of music, something had shifted between her and Adam. Nothing inappropriate had occurred. He was unfailingly respectful, always maintaining proper distance. But she caught him watching her when he thought she wouldn't notice, his blue eyes thoughtful. Their conversations grew longer, ranging from books they'd both read to philosophical discussions about the nature of the frontier and what constituted civilization. Boston has much to recommend it, Adam said one evening as they sat on the porch after the others had retired. But I wonder if all that refinement comes at the cost of something essential. Essential, Lillian prompted, enjoying the cool night air and the sound of crickets. Authenticity, perhaps. Here a person stands or falls on their own merits. There's nowhere to hide. That's both terrifying and liberating, Lillian admitted. In Boston, I was always conscious of appearances, of meeting expectations. Here, well, the land doesn't care about propriety. Adam smiled, the expression transforming his serious face. Precisely. The mountains don't give a damn about your pedigree, just whether you've got the sense to respect their dangers. Language, Mr. Blackburn, Lillian teased, earning a chuckle from him. Forgive me. But you understand my meaning. I do, and I find myself appreciating that honesty more than I expected. She looked out at the star-filled sky. When I first arrived in Redemption Creek, I thought I'd made a terrible mistake. Now I'm not so sure. Adam was quiet for a long moment. The schoolhouse opens next week. Yes, Lillian said, her heart sinking at the reminder. The town council sent word that everything is ready. I'll move into the teachers' quarters on Sunday. You've done fine work here with James and with the accounts. You'll be missed. The simple statement contained layers of meaning that neither of them seemed ready to address. I've enjoyed my time at the Diamond B more than I can express, Lillian said carefully. Your family has shown me great kindness. It's not kindness to appreciate value, Adam replied, his deep voice soft in the darkness. You've brought something to this ranch that we didn't know we were missing. Lillian's pulse quickened. Music, life, he said simply. A different perspective. Questions that make us think beyond cattle and crops. They sat in silence for a time, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. Finally, Adam stood. It's late, you should rest. Yes, Lillian agreed, rising as well. Good night, Adam. He hesitated, then reached out to brush a strand of hair from her face, his fingers barely grazing her cheek. Good night, Lillian. As she lay in bed that night, Lillian acknowledged the truth she'd been avoiding. She was falling in love with Adam Blackburn. Worse, she suspected he might be developing feelings for her as well. Martha's warning echoed in her mind. Adam didn't let people close, and Lillian was leaving in less than a week. The practical path forward was clear. Maintain professional distance for these final days, move to town as planned, and focus on her teaching career. Any other course would lead to complications neither of them needed. But as she drifted towards sleep, Lillian wondered if, perhaps, some complications were worth the risk. Saturday arrived with unseasonable warmth, the September sun beating down as if summer refused to relinquish its hold. It was Lillian's last full day at the Diamond B, and a strange melancholy had settled over the ranch. James had been unusually quiet during his morning lessons, and even Martha seemed less brisk than usual. After lunch, Adam surprised everyone by announcing a special outing. There's a swimming hole about 2 miles upstream, he told Lillian as they cleared the table. It's a tradition to visit it on the last hot day of the year. I thought you might enjoy seeing it before you leave. That sounds lovely, Lillian said, trying to ignore the pang at the words before you leave. James has been asking to go all week, Martha added, handing Lillian a basket. I've packed some food. You'll be hungry after swimming. Swimming? Lillian hadn't considered that possibility. I'm afraid I didn't bring a bathing costume. Martha waved a dismissive hand. No need for fancy costumes out here. The men will give you privacy. Just wear your chemise and petticoat, they'll dry quickly enough. An hour later, Lillian found herself riding alongside Adam, with James perched in front of him on the same horse. Miguel and 2 other hands followed, carrying fishing poles and extra provisions. The day was glorious, with clear blue skies and wildflowers still dotting the meadows they passed. Is the swimming hole on your property? Lillian asked, becoming more comfortable on horseback after weeks of practice. Just at the northern boundary, Adam replied. It's where the creek widens before joining the river, deep in the middle with a sandy bank on one side that's perfect for wading. Uncle Adam taught me to swim there last summer, James chimed in. I can go all the way across now, with supervision, Adam added firmly. When they arrived, Lillian understood why the place was special. The creek pooled into a natural basin, its clear water reflecting the surrounding cottonwood trees and rocky outcroppings. A small waterfall at one end created a pleasant background music, and a sandy beach curved along the near shore. It's beautiful, she breathed, dismounting with Adam's assistance. Best swimming hole in the territory, one of the hands Tom, she remembered declared as he unsaddled his horse. We'll set up over there, Adam told her, pointing to a grassy area beneath some trees. When you want to swim, just let us know and we'll move upstream to fish for a while. The thoughtfulness of the arrangement touched her. Thank you. They spent a pleasant hour on the bank, eating some of Martha's food and watching James construct an elaborate dam of stones and sticks. The day was indeed hot and the cool water looked increasingly inviting. I believe I'll take that swim now, Lillian finally said, fanning herself with her hand. Adam immediately stood. Of course, we'll head upstream. Give a shout when you're in the water. The men gathered their fishing gear and moved around a bend in the creek, James excitedly asking Miguel to help him catch a really big one. Once alone, Lillian quickly removed her dress and outer petticoats, leaving only her thin cotton chemise and a single petticoat, both of which would indeed dry quickly in the hot sun. The water was cold but refreshing as she waded in, gasping a little at the initial shock. Once she adjusted, however, the sensation was heavenly. Lillian had learned to swim as a child during summers spent at her aunt's home on the Massachusetts coast, and the familiar movement of arms and legs came back easily. I'm in. She called after a few minutes and soon heard James's whoops as he ran back toward the swimming hole, followed more sedately by the men. The boy cannonballed into the water, creating a spectacular splash. Miss Lillian, watch me swim across. Adam arrived as James began his determined paddling to the far shore. He had removed his shirt and boots, wearing only his trousers, which had been rolled up to the knee. The sight of his bare chest tanned, muscular, and marked with a few old scars made Lillian's breath catch. He's been practicing all summer, Adam said, wading in to supervise his nephew's crossing. Determined to reach the far side before winter. Lillian forced her gaze away from Adam's torso. He's quite good for his age. The next hour passed in a blur of splashing, laughter, and friendly races. James convinced Lillian to judge a diving contest between him and Miguel, with Adam disqualifying himself to serve as safety watch. Even the usually reserved Tom joined in, demonstrating an impressive cannonball that soaked everyone within 10 feet of his landing. Eventually, the men returned to fishing, leaving Lillian and Adam to supervise James as he constructed a boat from bark and leaves. I can't remember the last time I enjoyed myself so thoroughly, Lillian admitted, sitting on the sandy bank with her feet still in the water. Her wet undergarments clung to her, and she wrapped a small blanket around her shoulders for modesty, though the heat made it unnecessary for warmth. Adam sat beside her, close but not touching, his own shirt back on but unbuttoned. The simple pleasures are often the best. I've been thinking that more and more since coming west, she agreed. In Boston, entertainment required elaborate preparation and expense. Here, this perfect afternoon cost nothing but the effort to ride out. Will you miss it? Adam asked quietly, when you're living in town. Lillian looked at him, at the droplets of water still clinging to his dark hair, at the way the sunlight caught the angles of his face. Yes, she said simply. More than I expected to. Something changed in his expression, a softening, a decision made. Lillian, Uncle Adam. James called from the water's edge. Look what I found, a turtle. The moment broken, Adam rose to examine his nephew's discovery. Lillian remained on the bank, her heart racing at what might have been about to happen. Had he been about to ask her to stay, and if so, what would she have answered? The sun was beginning its westward descent when they packed up to return to the ranch. James, exhausted from swimming and excitement, fell asleep against Adam's chest during the ride home. Lillian rode beside them in companionable silence, her mind full of the day's memories and the unspoken words that hung between her and Adam. Back at the ranch, Martha took charge of the sleepy James, leaving Adam and Lillian alone on the porch as twilight deepened around them. "Thank you for today," Lillian said. "It was a perfect farewell to the Diamond Bee." Adam leaned against the porch railing, his expression serious. "It doesn't have to be farewell." Lillian's heart skipped. "What do you mean? I've been thinking about our arrangement." "The work you've done here with James, with the accounts, it's valuable, more valuable than I think either of us realized at first." He stepped closer. "I'd like to propose that you continue working here even after you begin teaching." "Continue," Lillian repeated, trying to understand. "You could live in town during the week, teach as planned, but perhaps return here on weekends. To help with the accounts, to continue James's advanced lessons. Martha and I would compensate you fairly, of course." It wasn't what she had hoped he might say, and disappointment warred with practicality in her heart. "That's a generous offer." Adam must have seen something in her face, for he moved closer still, his voice dropping. "That's not all I'm proposing, Lillian. No," her voice was barely a whisper. "No," he reached out, his hand gently taking hers. "I'm not a man given to flowery words or impulsive actions, but these weeks with you, they've changed something in me, in this house." Lillian's pulse raced. "Adam, I'm not asking for promises, just time. Time to see if what I feel, what I think you might feel too, has the strength to grow into something lasting." His honesty, his careful approach, so typical of the thoughtful man she had come to know, touched her deeply. "I do feel something," she admitted. "Something I wasn't looking for, wasn't expecting." Relief washed over his features. "Then say you'll consider my proposal. Come back to the Diamond Bee when you can. Let us discover if there's a future here, beyond the arrangements that brought us together." Lillian looked up at him, at the hope in his blue eyes, and knew her answer. "Yes, I'll come back." His smile then was like sunrise breaking over the mountains, rare, beautiful, transformative. Slowly, giving her every chance to retreat, Adam bent his head and pressed his lips to hers in a gentle, questioning kiss. Lillian responded, her hand coming up to rest against his chest, feeling his heart beating strong and steady beneath her palm. The kiss deepened, becoming a promise, a beginning rather than the ending she had feared this day would bring. When they finally parted, Adam kept her close, his forehead resting against hers. "I never expected you, Lillian Summers. When I heard you singing in town that day, something told me to stop to listen. I'm glad I did." "So am I," she whispered, her heart full. "So very glad." The following Sunday, Lillian moved into the teachers' quarters behind Redemption Creek's new schoolhouse, a simple but clean two-room dwelling that would be her home during the school week. The town council members welcomed her formally, and several mothers brought food and small welcoming gifts, their initial skepticism about the Eastern lady seemingly forgotten. "We heard you've been staying out at the Diamond Bee, Mrs. Peterson said as she helped Lillian arrange her few possessions. "Adam Blackburn's a fine man, kept this town going through the drought 3 years back, though he'd never admit it." "He speaks highly of your husband as well," Lillian replied, remembering Adam's explanation of the reduced grazing fees. Mrs. Peterson smiled knowingly. "Heard you'll be riding out there weekends to help with the books and teach that boy of his. Good arrangement for everyone, I'd say." News traveled fast in small towns, Lillian was learning. "Yes, it's a mutually beneficial arrangement." "Hum," the older woman hummed, much as Martha had done when Lillian had denied her romantic interest in Adam. "Well, we're glad to have you in Redemption Creek, Miss Summers. Children need proper schooling if they're to make something of themselves." School began the next day with 28 students ranging from 5 to 16 years of age. The work was challenging but rewarding, and Lillian found herself drawing on her experiences with James to engage the older boys who initially seemed resistant to a female teacher from the East. By Friday afternoon, As she dismissed her charges for the weekend, Lillian felt a deep satisfaction with her new role. She was making a difference, bringing knowledge and new perspectives to children who had previously had little formal education. And then there was the anticipation of returning to the Diamond Bee, to James's enthusiastic welcome, Martha's gruff affection, and Adam, whose letters had arrived twice during the week, brief but heartfelt messages that made her smile each time she reread them. As promised, Adam arrived in town to escort her to the ranch, just as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains. Seeing him waiting outside the schoolhouse, tall and straight in his saddle, made Lillian's heart leap in a way that both thrilled and frightened her. "Teacher," he greeted her with a smile, dismounting to help with her small bag. "How was your first week?" "Exhausting and exhilarating," she admitted. The Campbell twins are determined to test every boundary, but the older girls are eager to learn, and little Sarah Miller has already progressed from recognizing letters to reading simple words. Adam helped her mount the gentle mare he had brought for her. "You sound happy." Lillian smiled down at him. "I am happier than I've been in a very long time." His eyes held hers for a moment before he swung up onto his own horse. "Good, that's good." The ride to the Diamond Bee was filled with comfortable conversation about her students, the ranch's operations, and James's progress on his map, which had apparently expanded to include topographical features and detailed drawings of local wildlife. As they crested the final hill and the ranch came into view, golden in the late afternoon light, Lillian felt a surge of emotion. This place, these people, had become important to her in ways she hadn't anticipated when she first arrived in Arizona territory. "Welcome back," Adam said softly, noting her expression. "It feels like coming home," Lillian admitted, then blushed at the intimacy of the confession. Adam's face softened. "I hope it always will." The weekend passed in a blur of activity, helping Martha preserve the last of the summer vegetables, reviewing the ranch accounts with Adam, giving James an advanced reading lesson, and enjoying the now traditional Saturday evening music gathering, which had expanded to include several of the ranch hands. On Sunday afternoon, as they prepared for her return to town, Adam invited her for a short ride to a nearby hilltop. The view was spectacular: rolling grasslands, distant mountains, and the ranch buildings nestled in the valley below. "I wanted to show you this," Adam said as they dismounted. "This is where I stood 15 years ago and decided this land would be mine." Lillian turned in a slow circle, taking in the panorama. "I can see why. It's breathtaking." "Not as breathtaking as watching you sing," Adam said, his voice low. "Or seeing you with James, patient and kind even when he's being stubborn, or the way you stand up to Martha when she gets too bossy." Lillian laughed softly. "Your sister means well, she does, and she likes you, which is saying something. Martha doesn't approve of many people." He took Lillian's hand. "What I'm trying to say, rather poorly, is that you fit here, Lillian, in a way I didn't expect anyone could." "Adam." She stepped closer to him, drawn by the intensity in his blue eyes. "I know it's too soon for declarations or promises," he continued. "You've only just begun your teaching career and we've known each other a short time, but I want you to know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, there's a place for you here. Permanently." The implication was clear, and Lillian's heart swelled with emotion. "I think," she said carefully, "that I might be ready sooner than either of us expected." Adam's face lit with hope. "Is that so?" "Yes," she whispered, reaching up to touch his cheek. "Very much so." His kiss was more confident than their first, a promise of things to come, of a future neither had imagined when they first met in Redemption Creek's dusty street. When they parted, Adam kept her close in the circle of his arms. "You know, I've been thinking about expanding the main house," he said conversationally, though his eyes danced with meaning. "Perhaps adding a music room. James should learn an instrument, don't you think?" Lillian laughed, joy bubbling up from deep within her. "I think that's an excellent idea, Mr. Blackburn. I'm glad you approve, Miss Summers." His expression grew serious. I can't offer you Boston's refinements or luxuries, but I can promise you this: respect, honesty, and a love that will only grow stronger with time. Those are the only luxuries worth having, Lillian replied, her heart full to bursting. And I promise the same in return. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting the landscape in gold and amber, Adam and Lillian lingered on the hilltop, planning a future neither had expected to find in this wild, beautiful territory that had brought them together. The weeks turned to months, and Lillian's weekend visits to the Diamond Bee became the highlight of her life in Redemption Creek. As the school teacher, she earned the town's respect through her dedication and innovative teaching methods. As Adam Blackburn's sweetheart, for that's what she had become in the eyes of the community, she gained acceptance even from those who had initially mocked her singing. Winter came early that year, with November bringing heavy snows that sometimes made the journey between town and ranch treacherous. During one particularly severe storm, Lillian found herself snowbound at the schoolhouse for 3 days. On the morning of the 4th day, as she was melting snow for washing, pounding at the door startled her. When she opened it, there stood Adam, his face red from cold, snow dusting his coat and hat. "Adam," she gasped. "What are you doing here in this weather?" He stomped his boots on the threshold before stepping inside. "Checking on you. The pass cleared enough for travel, and I couldn't wait another day without knowing you were safe." The simple statement, delivered without drama but with profound sincerity, cemented what Lillian already knew. She loved this man completely. "I've missed you," she said, taking his cold hands in hers. "Enough to marry me?" The words came out in a rush, surprising them both. Adam immediately looked chagrined. "I had a speech prepared and a ring back at the ranch. This isn't how I planned to ask." Lillian laughed, joy bubbling up inside her. "When have our plans ever mattered? From the moment you told me to keep singing, we've been improvising. Is that a yes?" His blue eyes searched hers, hope and love shining clearly. "Yes, Adam Blackburn, 1,000 times yes." They were married on Christmas Eve in Redemption Creek's small church, with Martha standing proudly beside Lillian and James serving as ring bearer. The entire town turned out for the celebration, which continued well into the night at the town hall, with Miguel and his guitar leading the dancing. As promised, Adam had begun expanding the main house, adding not only a music room but a larger study that could serve as a classroom when James's cousins from neighboring ranches joined him for lessons. Lillian would continue teaching at the schoolhouse through the spring term, but afterward, she would focus on creating a small school at the Diamond Bee for the children of the ranch hands and neighboring properties. On their wedding night, as they lay together in the quiet darkness of Adam's now their bedroom, Lillian nestled against her husband's chest, listening to his steady heartbeat. "Happy," he murmured against her hair. "Completely," she answered truthfully. "I came west searching for a new beginning, but I found so much more. When I heard you singing that day in town," Adam said softly, "something told me you were important, though I couldn't have imagined how much. You brought music back into my life, Lillian. Not just songs, but the harmony I'd forgotten could exist." Lillian raised herself on one elbow to look into his beloved face. "They laughed when I tried to sing that day if you hadn't spoken up. But I did," he said simply, "and I always will. Your voice is the sweetest sound I know." "I love you, Adam Blackburn," she whispered, kissing him gently. "And I love you, Lillian Blackburn," he replied, his arms tightening around her, "more than I have words to say." As the snow fell softly outside their window, Lillian drifted to sleep in her husband's arms, secure in the knowledge that she had found her place in this wild, beautiful land, a place of purpose, belonging, and a love that had begun with a song. Spring brought new life to the Diamond Bee. The expanded main house was completed just as the first wildflowers began dotting the meadows. Lillian finished her term at the schoolhouse, handing over the position to a capable young man from Denver who had answered the town council's advertisement. Her small school at the ranch opened with 10 students ranging from 5 to 14 James, 4 children of ranch hands, and 5 from neighboring properties. The classroom, converted from a former storage building, was bright and airy, with large windows and sturdy tables Adam had crafted himself. Music remained an essential part of their lives. True to his word, Adam had ordered a piano from San Francisco, which arrived by wagon in pieces and was painstakingly assembled in the new music room. Though neither Lillian nor Adam played, they hired a traveling musician to give James lessons, and the boy showed surprising aptitude. On warm evenings, they often sat on the porch, Lillian singing while Miguel accompanied her on guitar, or simply enjoying the natural symphony of crickets and night birds. Sometimes, when the hands were away and James asleep, Adam would ask Lillian to sing just for him, his eyes never leaving her face as her voice filled their home with melodies both joyful and poignant. "Sing the one from our first night," he would request, meaning Amazing Grace, and Lillian would comply, her voice stronger and more confident than on that fateful day in Redemption Creek, but with the same sincerity that had first caught Adam's attention. In late summer, as they celebrated their first anniversary with a family picnic at the swimming hole, Lillian shared news that brought tears to Adam's eyes. They would welcome a child in the winter. "A baby," he whispered, his hand gently covering her still flat stomach. "Our baby." "Are you pleased?" Lillian asked, though his radiant expression had already answered her question. "Beyond words," he replied, kissing her tenderly. "You've given me everything I never knew I wanted, Lillian Blackburn, and now this greatest gift of all." James was equally excited about his impending cousin, immediately planning all the things he would teach the baby about ranch life. "I hope it's a girl," he announced at supper to everyone's surprise. "Boys are boring, I'm already a boy, a girl would be more interesting." Martha laughed, her usual reserve softened by the joyful news. "You may change your mind about girls being more interesting when you're older, nephew." The months passed swiftly, filled with preparations for the baby and the usual ranch activities. Lillian continued teaching through November, her growing belly often providing practical lessons in biology for her curious students. On a snowy December night, with Martha serving as midwife and Adam pacing anxiously outside their bedroom door, Lillian brought their daughter into the world. They named her Alina Grace, honoring both Adam's past and the hymn that had brought them together. "She's perfect," Adam whispered when Martha finally allowed him to enter, his voice choked with emotion as he gazed down at the tiny bundle in Lillian's arms. "Just like her mother." "She has your eyes," Lillian replied, tired but radiant, "the Blackburn blue." "And your voice, I'll wager," he said with a gentle smile, "the strongest lungs in Arizona territory." As if on cue, Alina let out a lusty cry, causing both parents to laugh. "Singing already," Lillian murmured, gently rocking their daughter. "No one will ever tell her to stop." "Never," Adam agreed fervently. "She'll sing as loud and as long as she pleases." In the years that followed, the Diamond Bee flourished, as did the Blackburn family. Alina was joined by a brother, Thomas Adam, 2 years later, and eventually by a second sister, Martha Rose, named for her aunt who had become as dear to Lillian as any blood relation. Lillian's school grew in reputation, attracting students from as far as Redemption Creek itself, whose parents preferred her innovative methods to the more traditional approach at the town school. Adam expanded the classroom twice to accommodate the growing numbers, and eventually hired an assistant teacher to help with the youngest children. Music remained central to their family life. Alina inherited her mother's clear voice and her father's determination, learning every song Lillian knew and demanding more. Thomas showed a talent for the piano that surpassed James's, while little Martha Rose preferred to dance, twirling around the music room with unabashed joy. James, now a young man of 19, managed much of the ranch alongside Adam, his education supplemented by 2 years at a college in California. He had his uncle's head for business and a natural leadership ability that made the ranch hands respect him despite his youth. On the 10th anniversary of their first meeting, Adam surprised Lillian with a trip to San Francisco, leaving the children in Martha and James's capable care. It was the first time either of them had traveled so far since settling at the Diamond B, and the first time they had been alone together for more than a day since Alina's birth. "What do you think?" Adam asked as they stood on a hill overlooking the spectacular bay, the city sprawling below them. "Different from our view at home. Beautiful," Lillian acknowledged, "but not more beautiful than what we have." Adam's arm tightened around her waist, no regrets about leaving civilization behind. Lillian turned to face him, taking in the beloved features that time had only made dearer to her: the crinkles at the corners of his eyes, the touch of silver at his temples, the strong jawline that their son had inherited. "I didn't leave civilization behind," she said softly. "I found it in its truest form with you. In the community we've built, the family we've raised, the love we share." She touched his cheek. "No regrets, Adam, not one." His kiss was as tender as their first, yet filled with the depth of feeling that a decade of partnership had nurtured. "You're still perfectly in tune, Mrs. Blackburn," he murmured against her lips. "As are you, Mr. Blackburn," she replied with a smile. "We make beautiful music together." Hand in hand, they watched the sun set over the Pacific, their hearts full with the knowledge that their greatest adventure waited for them back home, at the Diamond B Ranch, where a chance encounter and the courage to keep singing had led to a harmony neither could have imagined on that dusty street in Redemption Creek so many years before.